What's up, YouTube? My name's Critical69, aka Critical629, because that's when I stream 6 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. Today, I'm here to bring you another critical guide on how to take your gameplay in Conqueror's Blade to the next level. You turn my sixes to nines. Before we get into the video, over 84% of you are not subscribed to this channel. Please be sure to click the subscribe button below, as it 1, doesn't cost you anything, and 2, gets me out of the joke of a meme that is 84%. Yup. In this guide today, we will be reviewing how to properly play the weapon class Poleaxe in Season 8. Be sure to use the titles at the bottom of your screen. Each section will bring you to the proper section that you may want to review, whether that's skill choice, attribute choice, or proper gameplay mechanics. Poleaxe is one of the main weapon classes in Conqueror's Blade that wears heavy armor. For the most part, you're going to be a heavy armor, crowd controlling, target locking down class that makes sure that if there's any key targets, you lock that down. If there's any pushing, you lock that down. Your job is to make sure that heroes on the front line do not disrupt your push or your defensive hold. In order to do this, there's 4 key skills that you need to have in your tool belt. The first one is known as Old Billhook. Now this slows your target, but more importantly, pulls them towards you. It knocks them down. It's very, very key to interrupt certain skills with this and keep these heroes locked down on the front line. The second is your main damage. This one is Back to Corbin. Back to Corbin you're going to be using in conjunction with your ultimate. But this is pretty much 3 swipes that do an extensive amount of damage. The third skill is Pushback. This is also a knockdown. This is very, very good because 1, it knocks the enemy down, and 2, it removes a daze or a knockdown from yourself. It's a very good recovery. It's essentially Uku's Doom, but a slightly longer range. The final is your ultimate, Rough Justice. Rough Justice is an amazing skill that locks down a target for a few seconds. Now, the biggest thing about Rough Justice is that you don't always want to keep the animation going through. This is where we get into animation canceling. Your Rough Justice is designed to lock down a target, and the second you land the hit and maybe a second hit of Rough Justice, you want to animation cancel it, roll through the target, turn around, and use Back to Corbin 1 or 2 swipes, depending on the timing and how quick you are doing this, then go back into Pushback or Billhook to keep the enemy target CC'd for as long as possible. Poleaxe is one of the most annoying and successful classes at doing this, and it's very fun to play. The other skills that people sometimes argue to use is the other ultimate, Lokabar Strike. Now this does an extensive amount of damage and also removes dazed and knockdown effects, and it can knock the enemy off their horse. I personally do not use this skill. Some people swear by it, but the fact that you can have a 3 to 4 second lockdown of a hero with Rough Justice is insanely powerful for controlling individual targets, and I think this is more valuable, Rough Justice, than Lokabar Strike. The other skills that Poleaxe have, not ultimates, are Grim Harvest, which also removes daze and knockdown effect, which is pretty strong. But it doesn't have as large of a range as something like Pushback. So instead I use that. This also does blunt damage, which can chunk some people as well. I personally do not use Grim Harvest. The final, which was very, very strong last season, is Weapon Dance. This paired with last season's rune, which gave you a health buff, I believe, was insanely powerful. Unfortunately, Weapon Dance does not affect the units around you. It only affects heroes, so it's really not that powerful anymore. Now let's review your skill attributes and your armor. These go hand in hand. depending on how good your armor is, you're most likely going to be using the heavy armor of Guardsmen. Now, I personally build out a couple different sets of Guardsmen. One is my leadership set, which you can see equipped. Two is my tank health set, which you can see equipped right here. And then three is my armor-based set, which I switch in between these two because it depends on what I need. As you can see, one does piercing and one does slashing. So I pretty much revolve around those three sets depending on if I'm doing sieges, territory wars, or deathmatch. So more armor allows you to be more tanky on the front line against low armor penetration attackers. More health allows you to be tankier on the front line against high penetration attackers. More leadership allows you to bring more units. So depending on which mode you're doing, what you think you're going to be taking more damage from, and your playstyle, that's how you differentiate those three stats, as to say. Personally, when I run Poleaxe in sieges and in ranked, I go full leadership. When it's territory wars, I switch over to my full health set. Now, I love having full health on Poleaxe because it allows you to be extremely tanky when you're doing something like using your ultimate to lock someone down, animation canceling it, using Back to Corbin to dish out some damage, and then using pushback. Now, you must think, well, you're pretty much a huge target when you do this because you're essentially going to be standing in the same position for about 5 to 6 seconds. So you want to be as tanky as possible, and the only way to achieve that is through health, because a lot of the things that are going to try to interrupt you during that time will not be able to interrupt you. Now, you're wondering how. That's because of this wonderful rune that Poleaxe has. This is one of the strongest runes in the game that was added this season. They slightly modified it, and I think it also existed last season, but they changed it to like skill versus attack. So like after an attack, they had to tweak it a little bit. Now, if I use any one of my skills during a 30-second period that then goes on cooldown, I'm immune to all control effects for 5 seconds, which is insane, except for, I believe, dual blade ultimates and maul grabs and probably another Poleaxe ultimate. Those are the only three. I'm not completely sure on this, but for the most part, whenever I do get interrupted, it's because of those three skills. But anything that can stagger you, knock you down, or anything like that does not take effect for 5 seconds, which allows you to do things like dismounting off your horse, instantly using your ultimate, and then using Back to Corbin. And by the time that whole process is over, you have CC immunity, and you can pretty much get out of there with a kill under your belt, which is phenomenal. The other rune that I use on my armor, this is the Epic Schematic, which I got a very good roll on, Epic Schematic weapon for Poleaxe. Usually you would use the Punisher. The other rune is the max health is gradually increased for over 300 seconds for a maximum of 300 points. That's basically 3k free health when you are not under attack or anything like that, which is really, really strong. The runes that I choose for sieges would be bandage healing improved by 25% on my helmet, toughness, which you cannot pass up on. 7 toughness is 700 health, which is insanely strong. Then you got critical defense rune. Now, critical defense rune is one of the most important runes across all classes. This critical defense allows you to completely neglect anyone critical striking you. I'll probably make another video on how critical defense versus critical value works, but for the most part, if you have anywhere from 300 to 330 critical defense, it is very, very difficult for people who are attacking you to have more than that critical defense in their critical value, so therefore they won't be able to critical you, which is very, very strong. This rune completely changed people's abilities to use critical strikes. The next rune is on your boots. This one is for sieges. I use healing can be performed while moving. Now, I personally just started recently using this. It's very strong, except in my head, I've been playing for multiple seasons. I still, every time I hit the heal button, I don't move. I need to get it out of my head that I can move now. So I can move while healing, which is you can walk normal pace or you can sprint while healing. And that's very, very strong, except for some reason, every time I click H, which is my heal, I still sit there because I just, it's muscle memory. So I need to work on that. Then you just, add in the strength and the toughness rune. For your gloves, you're going to do strength, toughness, and agility and armor. This is what I personally do. It works for me. My armor set and my health set is pretty much set up the same way, minus the healing of the bandages and the healing while moving, because when I put on my heavy armor set that is used for territory wars, then I usually switch over to more tankiness or more damage, because when you retreat from the front line in territory wars, you are damaging your team's ability to hold that line. You need to be dying on the front line if you have the support of an alliance or a house like myself, where we can bring in an extra 15 mustering. It's different for people who don't play on that scale, where you want to survive for as long as possible. Then that healing is very effective. But for me, it's about being in the front line for as long as possible and surviving and doing as much damage for as long as possible on the front line without retreating. Now let's take a quick look at the 4-piece epic schematic set for the armor for Poleaxe. I don't think it's very valuable over the tankiness that can be acquired through guardsmen. As you can see here, the 4-piece is the 2-piece is increases the degree to which weapon dance reduces enemy damage dealt by another 40%. Now, if weapon dance applied to units, this would be extremely strong. But unfortunately, it only applies to heroes. So it's just another way to lock down a hero. But if you're killing the hero, you don't have to worry about them doing damage to you, right? The other 4-piece, which is the Back to Corbin skill, can now strike 4 times. For me, I don't see much value in this, because most of the time when you're using your animation canceling of the ultimate into Back to Corbin, you're not swinging 4 times. You're swinging 2 and 3 at the most. 3 is the most you can actually do. But I'm saying 3 takes way too long, and the person is going to be out, is going to dodge roll out, or you're going to be needing to use pushback or bill hook to pull them back in to your CC lockdown. 3, you won't be able to do that. 2, you can. So having 4 strikes is assuming that they're going to be standing still or knocked down for an extensive amount of time, which you do not have the power to lock them down unless you have assistance from someone else. So I don't see the 4-piece Poleaxe set being very valuable at all. Maybe in the future, if they adjust these, that would be pretty helpful. But as of right now, as of Season 8, I don't see it being very strong. The final discussion for your setup for Poleaxe will be attribute points. I personally put them all into health. That gives you about 7,200 extra health, and it's extremely helpful for when you're trying to survive and finish your combo on the front lines. Some people do put some armor in there, but I personally have pretty decent armor when I do switch to my main tank set, which is, let me put that on for you right now. That way you can see, which is around 900 defenses, which is a pretty safe bet for a lot of classes. When I put on my tank set, you can see my health goes up to, once it ticks all the way, it'll be at 39,069. That's when I stream on Twitch, 6 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern. Hell yeah. And my defenses tick up to over 9,000 for the ones that matter. Slashing is definitely, they're building more units that are going to be doing damage on slashing, which is a bigger issue now. But initially it wasn't really too much of an issue because the heavy hitter classes before Berserkers weren't really crazy. Now you get Reapers and Zerkers that do slashing damage, so I might want to reassess this at some point. But because my weapon does so much damage and has so much penetration, I'm fortunate enough that I don't need to put any points into agility or strength. You may want to mess around with that. A safe bet for slashing damage is anywhere from 17 to 1900, and then a safe bet for slashing armor penetration is anything above 2000. Mine's a little bit overkill. Now we're going to be reviewing units that work very, very well with Poleaxe. Now, depending on your playstyle, you can do things like using range because you can protect that range. So things like Falconetti Gunners, Pavis, or any type of range that is vulnerable to a hero coming, diving them, and killing them, also Flamers. That's very strong to have a Poleaxe support it with. Because if a hero comes down to lock you down or to kill your units, you lock them down. That's all it is. So range units, very strong with Poleaxe. Now, if you don't like range units, like myself, I sometimes use them, not very often. I prefer more frontline play. You can use things like jabs. So jabs are very strong with Poleaxe because all you got to do is lock the person down, knock them down, and then you do a jab volley and they're dead. If you don't have the damage on your Poleaxe to pretty much one shot, as to say, the target, then your jabs can provide plenty of damage to obliterate heroes that you've locked down. Other things that work very well is frontline units like Reapers, Madao, Shield Maidens because it buffs yourself. Stalwarts, of course, they're moving away from the meta, but if you don't have another shield unit, then Stalwarts. Berserkers, because again, you can use your lockdown and then have your Berserkers sprint into them. Any unit with charge is another one because while they're knocked down on the ground and you time a charge with such things as Palace Guards, Azaps, Boomer Bros, aka Gray Hair Garrison, or Land Sharks, Landschnecks, all those charges can obliterate heroes, and you locking them down in front of you will allow you to land these charges and take the hero out of the battle, which is very, very strong. When you're on the front line with these units, if you choose to be, you need to take into account what you're going to be doing on the front line. Now, I'm going to show you videos of this. A lot of people don't realize that when you are using your Poleaxe, the basic attack of Poleaxe is really, really weak. As you can see here, your first attack does most of the damage compared to the last attack. You don't want to be using your second or third or even fourth attack because it takes way too long. So, with that in mind, if you are going to be on the front line, which I highly suggest you limit your exposure on the front line and use more of your dismount into, but if you are going to do this, then you're going to want to attack and roll. Attack and roll. That's your basic attack right there. That is if for some reason you're on the front line and you don't have Becta Corbin or you don't have your mount and you need to do as much damage as possible, it's that, because you avoid damage on the front line while using your basic attack, because it is the strongest out of 2 and 3, and then 4 just takes way too long to activate. You're going to be relying on Becta Corbin to be doing most of your damage, and when you're not doing damage on the front lines or using Becta Corbin whenever it's on cooldown, you want to be on your horse or using the dismount off of the horse to stun groups. The dismount off of a horse for Poleaxe is one of the strongest dismounts in the game. I'll show plenty of clips of this, of where you dismount. There is a delay, so you have to get used to the timing on it. But the issue is that first you dismount and you're going to do an initial hit that is blunt damage, and it ranges from like 800 to 1200 damage depending on the target. This isn't the main damage at all. The second is a larger, more powerful in the sense of damage, slashing damage, and AoE stun. It is extremely strong when disrupting frontline units. This final scene is dismounting on some berserkers, and in it you just see me killing some berserkers, stunning them, keeping them CC'd, and then the hero comes back to reinforce his berserkers, but it's all too late as I have my ultimate, and I just use the simple ultimate Becta Corbin rollout, finish off the berserkers. Over 84% of you are not subscribed to this channel. Please be sure to click the subscribe button below, as it 1, doesn't cost you anything, and 2, gets me out of the joke of a meme that is 84%. Yup.